Hey everybody, and welcome to episode 12, Property Mastermind podcast with Hillary. This week's special guest, again with the super Bob Andersen, guru, property legend, all of that stuff. I can't help but I actually call him Google when it comes to property. So Bob and I will be talking about highest and best use when it comes to property and the reasons you need to understand what the highest and best use of your property is before you go buying or selling. So let's jump into episode 12. Here we are, episode 12. Welcome, Bob Andersen.
Good to be back. I love doing your podcast or joining you in it.
Well, it's kind of ours, really.
Oh, no, it's with Hillary Saxton.
Yeah,
it's yours.
And yours. Well, we're both here. Well, both here sometimes. Anyway, both here today. So talking about highest and best use, and it's a topic that we often discuss in the community, Bob. You bring it up so much because you're constantly trying to educate people on what to do with their properties or when they're looking for something. So give us your description when it comes to highest and best use. What is the term? What does that mean for people to understand?
Well, highest and best use, you often see it on valuations done by valuers, of course. Highest and best use. And there is a definition of what it is. But from a developer's point of view, to me, it's what value does property have that gives you the best profit?
So end of the day, it's about the profit from that particular piece of property.
Yeah, because property can have more than one value.
Yes.
That's a weird thing to say. How could a property have more than one value? But it can, depending on its use.
I remember the first time that we talked about this and I had that realization. I was like, of course it makes sense. But sometimes the obvious things, unless somebody points it out, we actually miss it. So, yeah, you break it down, Bob, so people really get it.
I mean, most people know, let's say, what their house is worth. If you were to say to somebody, what's your house valued at? They might say, it looks $800,000. And that's probably correct as a house. As that particular house, on that particular block of land, in that particular suburb, at a particular point in time, that property is worth $800,000.
Oh, that's an interesting
as
point.
A house.
You brought up time there, and that has a bit to do with it, doesn't it?
Well, it does, particularly recently when we've seen large escalations in values in a short period of time. By the same token, if you go back to, let's say, the end of 2017, when Sydney and Melbourne had a really good run for about 5 years, a lot of growth, and then it had the correction that it had to have. From then up to, let's say, the next 2 years, up till the end of 2019, there was that correction, and then it started to make its way back up again. Just before COVID happened, Melbourne had reached a new peak, and Sydney was getting close by. So we have those market fluctuations for sure. But highest and best use to me is what use makes the most profit out of a parcel of land. Most
people think the more you jam on, the more properties or the more dwellings you jam on a piece of property, the more money you make. And what we're really alluding to is that's not always the case.
More isn't always better when it comes to profit. And look, let's face it, as developers, what we want to do is make the maximum profit that we can out of a property. That doesn't necessarily mean, as you just said very wisely, jamming as much on as you can. Because it can sort of hit a point of diminishing return. And, I've seen lots of sites that have a development permit, let's say for 5 townhouses, where they would have been better off with 4. In fact, if you do the feasibility and have a look at the profit, it makes more profit as a 4 townhouse project than it does as a 5 townhouse project.
I've seen you do those when you do your deal or no deals, where you break down a deal. Often you go back in time and look at something where somebody has got a development approval or building approval or wherever you're from, whatever
level it's up to.
Yeah, but sometimes they've gone and they've gotten that thinking, oh, cool, we'll jam more on. It makes it not feasible.
No, and what often happens is, and you've seen plenty of examples of this, is the design goes out the back door. So, I've seen lots, as I said, as an example, a 5 townhouse development approval where it should have been 4. If you think of the bottom level of a typical townhouse, they don't have to be this way, but most are. You've got a garage, kitchen, living, dining, powder room and a laundry. That's typically what you have on the ground level. On the next level up, which is actually a smaller square metre level. You'd have, let's say, 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, typically. Now, the problem is, with these townhouses, standard configuration, you can't keep shrinking stuff to fit the 5th one on without wrecking the design. So you can't have half a garage. There are
unless you have a motorbike.
Yeah, but like from a council point, I mean, even from building code, there are minimum sizes.
Yeah.
It might be, let's say, an enclosed garage. It might be 3 metres or 3.2, whatever it is, wide, 3.2 metres wide, let's say. Well, you can't have a garage that's 1.8 metres wide. You can't have a garage that's 4.5 metres deep. If it's supposed to be, say, 5.7
just becomes
metres.
Practically useless or annoying.
No, it's no good saying, well, look, I've got a motorbike, I don't need it, as a developer. Let's just sell to people with motorbikes and cut the garage right down small. You can't, you can't do it. So you can't have half a garage just because you're trying to fit 5 where 4 would fit. So where can you trim back? Well, you can't trim the garage back. The powder room, toilet and a basin, well, you can't do much about that. Laundry, well, yeah, you can put them in a cupboard, but really you're not saving much. So what happens is it's the kitchen, living, dining area that gets cramped up when you're trying to fit 5 on instead of 4. And, you're going to like an L-shaped kitchen where you end up with the dining room virtually in the kitchen. That's what happens. You end up with a small living area. I've seen designs where virtually it's either a living room or a dining room, but it can't be both.
Yeah.
And an L-shaped kitchen, you don't want to be like eating in the kitchen. This is not 1950 something.
No.
And that's what happens. And that's like what we say, overcooking. We use that term. That design's overcooked, which means they've just tried to jam too much on.
Get as much happening there as possible.
Bit of developer slang.
So definitely not the highest and best use in that case to be putting extra on. And sometimes properties are just better off being left as a house. How many times have we seen that?
Well, exactly.
Especially at the moment, yes.
Yeah, well, I looked at a site the other day that had 4 different uses from a town planning point of view, which means it has 5 different prices, a different value, if you like, for each use.
Take us through them. So what was it?
Okay, so this particular one, it was an 809 square metre lot. It's roughly 20 metres wide and 40 metres deep. And it had a house on it, pretty much in the middle. Besides that, it was what we call a splitter block because it was already 2 lots on one title. So the alternative now, we've got a house on basically 1 lot, but technically 2. Or we could subdivide it into 2 lots quite easily, but we'd have to knock the house over. It happened to be zoned for 2-level townhouses or 2-level, let's say 2-level medium density, where you could do either townhouses or you could do apartments. So here we're looking at it. It's one dwelling, if you like, 4 uses and 4 values. A house on a lot. It has a value as a house on a lot, whatever that's worth as a house. And that'll depend, of course, on, the location, the house, the size, whether it's been renovated or not, all those things. But it has a value as a house. It also has a value as a potential 2-lot subdivision. So what's that? Well, it'd be different because how do you know what it's worth as a 2-lot subdivision? Well, you'd have to do a feasibility and come up with what value that land would have to be purchased at to make a required profit. But it could also be, this particular lot, 4 townhouses, 4 2-story townhouses. So it has a different value again as townhouses. As well as that, because of the 2-story height limit, you could do apartments. So this is a situation where you could do 6 2-bedroom apartments. So you've got a house, a 2-lot subdivision, 4 townhouses, 3-bedders, or 6 2-bedroom apartments.
Which one worked out best? Like which was the best?
Well, this particular one, it turned out to be the house.
Really?
Yeah. And look, we've seen house values rise a lot, haven't we? Yeah, particularly in the last 6 or 8 months.
Yeah, it's August 2021, so at the moment land's worth a fair bit.
Oh, yeah. The first 6 months of 2021, big boost. And it's still, even today, it's still on the upward trajectory, but flatter trajectory. So what we've seen is a big increase in house values. Not so much the same percentage increase in townhouses or apartments, although I think that's yet to come. So what's happened in a number of situations, let's just say prior to this big jump in values, we've had a site, let's just say it's worth $800,000 as a house. Now, as a 4 townhouse development, it might have been worth maybe $800,000 as well. The problem is this. At the moment, that $800,000 house is now $1 million.
Oh, crikey. Awesome.
But as a 4 townhouse site, it might have only gone up $50,000 because the value of townhouses hasn't gone up so much.
Yeah.
So, you know, at one point, say 6, 8, 10 months ago, you could have bought it as a house, bought it as a site for $800,000 and it'd work. Now, you can't. You have to pay $1 million because that's what it's worth as a house. But it's only worth $850,000 as a townhouse site. That's the issue. And we've seen a bit of that happening.
Yes. Like at the moment, this is happening. Have you experienced this before? Like you've been, like this is your, how many cycles you've gone through, 38 years. So when was the last time you saw it happen at this, to this sort of close to this extent?
2004.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then that's not necessarily nationally. I mean, traditionally, cities have had like boom periods when others might have been flat. But in recent times, it's all been, the whole country's been on the way up, every single state.
Mm.
In fact, every capital city is at a new record peak in terms of the value of property, value of houses in particular, other than Perth and Darwin, but they're on an upward trajectory.
Mm.
So, yeah, look, I have seen it. I've seen just about everything in 38 years in property, but that's happened lately, which makes it a little bit more difficult to find a site because of that house value.
Mm.
But so what do you need to happen? Well, you need houses to slow down a bit and let's say townhouses to catch up a bit. And I think that will happen. And when that does, then that example I just said, the house at $1 million, now as a 4 townhouse site, it's worth $850. So as townhouses go up in value, the land value goes up as well.
Right. So do you see this as like, where is the, there's always an opportunity somewhere for somebody. Where do you see the opportunity in this current market if we're looking at highest and best use?
Well, if you're going to, let's say you're looking at doing a townhouse development, it's going to have to be the worst house. The old saying, worst house in the best street. Well, You can't always do that, but it's going to be where houses are not in very good condition, where the land is where the value is, not so much the house. And
you might feel like you're overpaying initially.
Yeah, well, that's the temptation in this sort of a market, is for developers to do a feasibility and for the required development margins not there. But they think, well, in a year's time when I'm finished and I'm selling everything, let's say, the market should have lifted. So they're saying, look, I don't mind paying a little bit over the top for the site at the moment because I know that the sale prices are going to continue. And that will pay catch up.
And we're seeing plenty of people do that right now.
Oh, look, a lot of people are. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm just saying there is obviously an element of risk when you're using a future sale price against a current acquisition price.
and you don't want to be getting pre-sales at that rate.
Well, no. Look, if you go back to, like I just mentioned before, the end of 2017, when the Sydney market peaked, the Melbourne market peaked, and then there was that correction for about 2 years before it lifted again. If you'd bought a site towards the end of 2017 in Sydney or Melbourne with the expectation that values were going to keep increasing, then they wouldn't have. And that's where it could have come to bite people that do that, and they would have had to wait or put a lot more money into the deal, make the bank happy. So, but yeah, highest and best use, so often I see people, not developers, but normal mums and dads.
Wood ducks?
Oh, not necessarily.
The odd wood duck.
Well, look, the wood duck generally is somebody that buys a property that's way overpriced. But I'm talking about sites, and look, we look at a lot of sites that have development permits, don't we? But a lot of the time, it's been a normal mum and dad who've got the development permit. It's rarely another developer. I mean, occasionally we might buy a site off another developer that's got a development approval and they're selling it for whatever reason. But generally, most sites that have a development permit, it's just a normal mum and dad. And the permit isn't always
reflective.
No, it's
not always the right
permit.
one. Yeah.
If you think just because something's got a development permit, it must be good, think again, because truly,
that's tip of the day.
Most of the deals I look at with a development permit end up in my rubbish bin.
Yeah.
For a whole heap of reasons.
But probably that would be the main one. It's just average mums and dads thinking that they're increasing the value of their property by getting a development permit. And at the end of the day, it's probably not the highest and best use of that land.
No, it might always have been better just as house value. And that's what I say, because this is this illusion that if you get a development permit, you add value. In a lot of cases, you do. But Not necessarily. I mean, what you have to do, and a mum and dad, I use the term nicely, don't know, is what they need to do. First of all, what's their house worth? Let's look at it as a house. Because what they want to do, they want to sell their property. They know it has development potential. And either somebody's whispered something in their ear or they just don't have a clue. And they think, well, if I get a development permit, I'll get a lot more for it when I sell it, without ever putting science behind it and doing the numbers. And it could be that situation that I mentioned before. You know, house is worth $1 million, but as a townhouse site's worth 800 or 850. So why would you go and get a development permit to sell it when in fact it's worth less as a site than as a house?
Yeah.
And that's what I see. And not just recently because houses have gone up. I've seen it my whole career. And particularly with sites that have a bit of a problem. If you've got a site that has a bit of a problem, let's say...
slopes, flooding.
Yeah, all of that.
Yeah.
It's going to cost you more to build for those reasons, but you can't sell it for any more. Therefore, the only way you can get out of it as a developer and make the profit margin is to buy the land for less. And, you know, that's not easy to convince your average mum and dad that that's the case. But what happens is that it costs more to develop, and therefore that reduces the value of the land. I mean, you've seen that one that I sometimes talk about at our 3-day workshop.
Yeah.
Where we had somebody who owns a house. Now, that house is worth about $650,000 as a house. It's on a bit of a noisy road. It's a nice house. It'd be worth more if it was 2 blocks back, but it is where it is. And as a house, it's worth about $650,000. They got a development permit for 7 townhouses. It's now worth, as a development site, less than $100,000. And the reason is the construction costs are through the roof. It was a slopey block. They couldn't get rid of the stormwater. So what they did is they built a big concrete slab up in the air so that they could flow the stormwater back to the street. There's some townhouses that are upside down.
Yeah, wrong way
where the
around.
garage is on top of the bedrooms and lots of slope. There's lots of retaining. Look, when you start cutting slopes,
retaining,
it's not just
extras. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Retaining and drainage. It's not the cost of the earthworks, you know, cutting and removing soil. It's the cost of the retaining.
And that's what people don't realise. Like, they just think, oh, that's not hard. And that isn't. But the retaining and afterwards.
Yeah.
What has to happen to the rest of it?
Exactly. Then you've got retaining walls. But then you can't just build a retaining wall because you have to have drainage that goes with it. Drainage behind the retaining wall. Drainage in front. It still has to get rid of everything. And then when you got cut and fill, where you're cutting some earth and then filling another part, that fill's soft. Now, even if it's compacted, when you do the foundations, you've got to go right through that fill into solid ground with things called piers. You know, they drill big round holes and put steel in it and pour concrete in. All of this adds a lot to the cost. So you've got piering, you've got consolidation of fill, you've got retaining, you've got drainage. And when you build them on a big concrete slab, suspended in the air on concrete piers.
It's just like cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
Yeah.
It's just dollars.
No, you just added like $60,000 or $70,000 to the cost of every townhouse. And you can't get 1 cent more when you sell them.
No.
And that's the issue. So that's $70,000 per townhouse. You have to get that off the land.
On the reverse, though, there are highest and best use when you can add extra properties. Remember, you've done that for a couple of mentoring students.
Yeah. I remember one we did well with a really good design. We got five on instead of 4. In fact, I'm thinking of another one, that one of Darren's.
He got 7, didn't he?
A good mate, Darren, yeah. The reason we got 7 on that one is people didn't realise that we could do 3 stories at that particular time, and rather than 2 stories. And as a result, we got 7 on instead of 4. That made a huge difference. That's not all bad news, of course, about.
No, I mean, imagine Sonia was all good to go, make a great profit, and then Bob's like, hang on, we can get another one on here, and it, without reducing the appeal of the others.
No, they look great. And not only that, where we were looking at 4 3-bedders, we ended up getting 5, and 3 of that 5 were 4-bedders.
Yeah, amazing.
So we got the extra money for the 4th bed, we got the extra money for the extra townhouse without sacrificing anything.
Sacrificing, that was the word I was after.
Yeah, and so that was a good result.
So don't panic. I suppose at the end of the day, it's about doing the FISO and looking at things, like an alien. My girlfriend said that to me the other day. She goes, "You're an alien too. You look at things differently. So how could you be an alien and look at the piece of land you've got and then run through the FISO scenarios and then make a bit more of a educated decision on what your piece of land or your what your property is actually worth?" what is the highest and best use of that piece of land lucratively.
And that's, all back to profit, like we started off saying at the beginning. For a developer, it's a pretty simple definition. The highest and best use is the use that we make the most profit on.
Yep.
And what is that? That example I said before, you have a house, it's worth a certain amount of money, that house. As a 2-lot subdivision, a different value. As 4 townhouses, a different value. As 6 apartments, a different value. So like that example I gave before of the 4 different uses. As a house, it has one value. As a 2-lot subdivision, a different value. As 4 3-bedroom townhouses, a different value. As 6 2-bedroom apartments, a different value. All different values. So how would we know which to do? And at the end of the day, like everything in property development, we've got to crunch the numbers.
Yeah.
That's one of the first things we do and say, okay, what's it worth as a house? That's normally not too hard.
No.
We could look at other sales recently in the area, similar properties. There's enough houses transacting for a value, if you like, to get a handle on what the house is worth. Most people know what the house is worth. Mind you, to do a 2-lot subdivision, a little bit more complex, a feasibility, not a hard one to do, a 2-lot subdivision, but we need to do that and work out what would we have to pay for this land to make a profit that you would normally expect to make on a 2-lot subdivision. It has that value. Same process with the 4 townhouses, same process with the 2-bedroom apartments. Although when it comes to the townhouses versus the apartments, we'd also be looking at that local market and what's the requirement.
Even as you were going through those, I think in the background as well, that plays a part. It has a massive impact. Like, who is the market? There's no point in, like you say, putting more on and no one's going to buy them because it's all housing around it, and you throw up an apartment building because you can make more money. If you can't sell and you're sitting on interest costs, you're certainly not going to be making money. So, there's all of that, making sure it's in the right place that matters as well.
That's everything. What you just said there is building to the market. But you have to know your market. You have to know what is your local market and build to it. There could be, I've seen it happen, there's an oversupply of apartments, but there could be an undersupply of townhouses, those sorts of things, So product's important, but highest and best use. So, 4 different values for 4 different uses, same property. Which is the best from a development point of view? Well, until we look at the numbers, we won't know. It might be worth more as a house. Even if it had a development permit, it might still be worth more as a house because, let's say, the townhouse project has a lower land value for that property. It could be that. Not unusual. And so that's highest and best use, a house. No good to us as a developer.
I'm thinking, Bob, let's wind it up. What would you give as a piece of advice for people around highest and best use? What would be like 2 takeaways that you would like to share with people?
Well, firstly, getting a development permit on a property doesn't necessarily make it worth more. And the only really way to know the right way to go is to do a feasibility. Look at the different uses. What are they? I just cited one that had 4 different uses. What are the uses? You might only be interested in townhouses, so that might be the only other use you're looking at. Do the numbers and compare that to the house value or the asking price, I suppose, if it's on the market. And that's it. So really, I guess 2 takeaways. Just because it gets a development permit doesn't mean it's worth more. And at the end of the day, you just got to crunch the numbers and make a call on those.
There you go. Some great advice there from Bob. Thanks, Bob, for sharing your tips there. Okay, before we wind up, I'm holding up Secrets of Property Millionaires Exposed this week, giving away this book. There are some pretty cool people in this book.
I've seen that book before.
Oh, Bob's written in it, so he's got a chapter. There's lots of different strategies around property. Obviously, we're all about the developing, and if you read Bob's chapter, it goes straight, he's talking about why he believes development is the pinnacle of all property strategies. So if you would like to win this, comment favourably or send me an email or whichever you would like. We'll be giving a copy away this week. I see that Joe Vidello's on there. Bob's actually doing an interview with Joe tonight. So by the time this podcast is released, it'll be too late. But I suppose we could send it out to a copy to our email database if you wanted to listen to that interview. On Armchair Investing, that one's on. But anyway, Secrets of Property Millionaires Exposed. If you'd like
personally
to
autographed by Hillary.
No, by you, Bob.
By both of us.
No one wants my autograph. They want yours.
Of course they do.
So, if you'd like a copy of this, comment, share, let us know. If you're going to share it on any other social media, take a screenshot and let us know. So Once again, thank you, Bob. That was episode 12. Looking forward to episode 13, solo episode with me. Thanks, everybody. See ya.
Bye.